Hello. Hi. I'm good. How are you? Word. Okay. Need to get this a little more centered so we can see what's going on. Go right there. That good? Seems good. Make sure I got a nice solid base coat so I can build up this fur texture. I too lazy to think. Okay. All right. I cannot share what I have been working on this week. I am sorry. Sorry to tell you. Woken from bed. Hello. See if we can't. It's going to be kind of tough to see some of the brush strokes I'm doing at first. But the whole goal is to slowly build up texture. And when I move on to a lighter color, you'll be able to see more clearly what I'm doing. But for right now, I'm just painting short little strokes to get that initial texture down. I do not know how long you'll be waiting. So I wouldn't hold your breath too much. Okay. All right, let's jump up in value. So we're going to use, I think, a bit of yellow ochre. No, I have not. I started the Elric of Melniboné. I think I'm only like, I don't know, 5 hours into the first book, collection of books, whatever. Seems interesting. Probably finish that and then don't know what I'll read after that. All right. So now that I've moved up in value, I'm going to start to build this texture up by doing these little short strokes. And I really want you want like kind of a stiff brush for this that can really trace like a thin line, but something that holds like a decent amount of paint. Let me see what I have. Let's try one of these synthetic, see how they do about holding the point. What was that? Flags Airbrush, hello. Thanks for following. Hi, Doug. All right. Yeah, this is good. So I want you to kind of notice how I'm painting, like I'm not just doing like one big patch of hair. I'm not doing like parallel strokes across the whole thing. I'm doing like trying to follow the sculpt a little bit. And one of the nice things about Lucas's sculpting is he's very subtle with like the texturing and the sculpt. But I'm kind of following the small shapes that he's sculpted and trying to paint the hairs like in tufts. Now, occasionally I can cross over between them, right? But I'm following, creating little sections of tufts of hair, and then I can bridge them to kind of get those stray hairs and things, but I'm not painting everything in like perfect little parallel brush strokes. I'm trying to follow the flow and direction of the sculpt while also thinking about like which direction the hair would grow. Three Body Problems are really in sci-fi novels. That's like classic, but it's been redone by others. Not very exciting. Kind of like found it. I don't know. I don't read a lot of science fiction. Science fiction kind of tends to bore me because they get like way into the science and not enough of the fiction. Hi, Minimancer. Flags. I mean, I am trying to stream more. I did a bit of streaming last year, not as much as I would have liked, but I was still learning about like how long projects and things would take me. So now that I'm got like a better sense, I can schedule a bit better and hopefully have more opportunities to stream. I'd like to do one a week, hopefully, but except for weeks where I'm like traveling for conventions or whatever. All right, so I don't have, since this is really like kind of my, I guess it's really like my second layer, I don't have to be perfect with the brush strokes. I don't have to be ultra thin because I'm going to continue to layer on top of this and just create more and more depth to the fur as I paint more little hairs, right? So instead of traditional like blending for layering shape and volume, I'm using the brush strokes to the texture of the fur itself to create the lights. Well, thank you. I guess I could stop real quick to show kind of where I'm at. So this is roughly where I after the stream last week, I finished some of the like base coating and things, and did some small refinement stuff that's sort of hard to see when I'm trying to paint like really close. But yeah, most you can watch last week's stream on YouTube, and I painted all the skin. So. So boars are interesting. I'm looking at a reference. They tend to have more gray hair, which as I go lighter, I'll put more gray. They tend to have a lot of gray like in between my eyes and on the upper part of the snout, but they have more browns like on top of their head and on the lower portion of the snout. So what I probably end up doing is I'll likely highlight most of it with the same tone, that kind of gray, and then I can go over it with glazes to like filter color on top to shift it more towards that brown. The hairs are also shorter on the lower part of the snout. Do you guys see what I'm doing all right? Just want to make sure that it's zoomed in enough and clear that you can see the like brushstroke patterns I'm doing. I want this to be pretty thick. If it's too watery, you won't get those clean lines. Really want to make sure I'm tracing lines and not just, if it's too watery, you won't get that strong coverage that you need to get that clean line, right? What is that? Obey Art. Hello. What? When the light is hitting my hand. You sure that's not just my hand? Thanks, Obey Art. I said the first couple layers are going to be really subtle in terms of how much I'm building up that texture. I don't want massive jumps, but you should be able to at least like see that texture now, right? Starting to build that up. You should probably be working. Oh, hey. Hi, Richard. I'm good. How are you? So you can see as we get to like the back hairs, they're more sculpted and gotta paint longer brushstrokes to mimic that long fur texture. And then back here in the back, where this is going to be in shadow, we don't have to do a lot. I'll maybe only go like one more layer on top of this, and since it's lower contrast and in shadow, like really that's go one more layer on top of that and that section will be done. Okay. And I'll work on the shadow side a little separately. I do have this area is in light, so I want to make sure I get this well lit. That's part of the what's called the cast shadow, and I want to make sure I go a little into the cast shadow with some of the fur and make that line a little uneven, because the natural shadows from the fur, the hairs will make that line jagged, right? It's not going to be perfectly straight because of the layering of the hairs. Okay, so I don't want to just use that straight yellow. It's going to be too yellow. So I'll take that previous brown, kind of light brown. In fact, this is kind of the color I'm looking for, so I don't have to mix as much. It's basically the same color, right? Now I can take some of the dark sand, which is another color we used on the skin. I'll also grab some of this blue to make the gray, which we also used in the lights of the skin. So I'm trying to reuse some of these colors, help create the color harmony. So I can grab some of this, some of that. To make my next light. I have to make sure it's just watery enough. The paint consistency is important here. I want to make sure I can paint these really thin tapered lines. All right, you guys can see that? Notice I'm not painting every brush stroke in the same direction. That's super important. Overall, this is essentially how this is the technique I use for painting fur, right? If it ever gets, well, we'll talk about it later, but if it ever gets too bright, it's easy to glaze over top of it and restore some of the volumes and bring some of the shadows back. If you go overboard, is this interesting? Does this make sense? Or you're all like, yeah, I know how to do this. Get out of here. Think I don't know how to paint animal fur? It is not my first boar. Well, technically it's my first boar. The last one was a warthog. Hi, 2A. But same principle applies. It's really any animal fur. It's really just about how, only difference is really how long their fur is, right? A horse is going to be like much shorter, like really, really short brush strokes. These are a bit longer. Would you paint the same way if it was badly sculpted? So there's some tricks you can do to deal with like really annoying fur sculpts. But yeah, sometimes you're fighting the sculpt instead of using the sculpt to your advantage, I guess. Like in the case of Lucas, I think the sculpt is really helping me achieve this texture as opposed to like kind of fighting me. For really, really dense fur tech, like ultra detailed fur texture, you can like fill it in with some glue or something if you want to knock down the texture a little bit, like PVA glue, or you can use a bit thicker paint to start to try and fill it in a little. But yeah, most of the time I'm not really trying to paint the actual texture of the fur that's sculpted. I want to create my own. So a lot of times you end up like painting over areas and crossing volumes that the sculptor has made. Where here I'm more using the small volumes that he's made for me just to inform the direction and kind of the tufts, like you can see in this area. Like there's some very subtle sculpting work done to create this kind of texture, and I'm using that to my advantage. I don't know if that really answers your question, but yeah, I mean, you have to fight badly sculpted texture sometimes. Which color do you, which color okay used to the light of the skin? His skin? It's this ice blue. I mean, there's some mixtures. You can go back and watch the video. It's on YouTube. Lucas's sculpture is just better. Lucas, here's what I'll say. Lucas sculpts for painters. Some sculptors sculpt for like the sculpture itself. I think certain types of texture on sculpts and things like that look better on an unpainted miniature. They might not be the best for painting, but yeah, I think Lucas knows how to sculpt a figure that that a painter will enjoy. I know you're half trolling me, Rhett, because you love Lucas, but see how I'm crossing the hairs over in spots? That's gonna help just like enhance the depth to the like fur, right? It's like see, it's almost like you can like see down into the fur, but it's, you know, painted on a flat surface. It's the exact same way like canvas painters paint fur on a, you know, a flat image. We're just doing it on a curved flat surface. That makes sense. Honestly, that class, I know some people enjoyed it. Really, the concepts for painting fur is very simple. The hardest part about it is the technique itself. The brush control is everything to achieving the technique, like just being able to paint thin brush strokes, like very fast, is probably the hardest part. And that's just becoming familiar with like how, like getting a feel for how far the model away is from the brush. And Yeah, it's a curved flat surface. It makes sense. And the brush control thing is kind of hard to teach. It is a very like, let me see if I can zoom out. I can kind of show you like how I actually like control the brush stroke. So it's like all in these like this. It's really all in like this finger, almost like a chopstick kind of motion. You know, if like you're holding chopsticks, you use the middle finger to create that motion. Well, it's the same thing except for like, so this is how I can do strokes really fast, and then I use my thumb to kind of like change the direction. But yeah, then it's just like it's this kind of sweeping arc motion, and you get used to doing that, and you can kind of like just barely like sweep the brush across the surface in an arc, and that's what's going to let you paint these really thin lines. But it can be a challenge to learn that kind of technique. It's really not like in the wrist, right? It's all about just like that consistent arc and knowing how far the brush is away from the surface of the model. And that all comes down to feel and repeatability. So if anyone wanted to take my brush class, sorry, I might not be offering it anymore, or my fur class. I don't know if it was as successful as I was hoping it would be in terms of like teaching the technique. We just dropping so many puns in the chat. Is that what's going on tonight? We're just dad joking it. Who dat? Jane Start, hello. Thanks for following. Yeah, I don't really know how much more to say about fur. This is kind of just, we'll start to like change up some of the color tone here with the blue. But that's roughly the technique. Pack Oso. Hello. Oh. Pac Paco Exo 88. Thanks for the raid. Ah, hola. ¿Qué pasa? ¿Qué estabas haciendo? Paco? How do you do a double C in Spanish? Pacostio? Thanks. A demon. A demon. That's cool. What kind of demon? A lady demon? Like a succubus or like a big demon? Big ugly demon? Hell yeah, okay. Hey, what do people think about that new Angron model? Anybody like it? Anybody way into it? They're gonna buy it. I think it's kind of cool. All right, I'm gonna stick to like just this side for now. Okay, so first I'm gonna do a little bit of this. Okay, you can start to see some of the, definitely start to see some more of the fur texture come together. Yeah, man, you gotta have it. All right. Pretty hard to see what I just mixed up. It's like a grayish green, kind of really light color. You'll see it on the figure. It won't look as green next to all this brown. Now these are, I want to make sure these are like very thin, and this is going to be concentrated more in the areas of light. In fact, that's probably a little too much. So I'm going to tone it down just a tad. So a boar does have like grayish hairs. Yeah, you don't have sound. So me explaining to you doesn't make any sense. Yes, boars have very grayish hairs. They're like a mix of brown and gray. But these are the bright lights, so I want like a slightly more brownish, and then I'll work my way into a bit of gray. I don't think the Angron model is particularly ugly, by the way. I think there's some really cool parts on it. Who's following? Dimmy Moon, thanks for following. See ya. See you, Rip. And he really thinks he's getting this one, huh? Don't like the wings. I don't know. I'm not quite sure about it. There's parts I really like. It at least like feels very Angron, I think, for a updated design, like compared to some of the, older art of him. I think like the head tubes and stuff look really good. But I also didn't like look at it in extreme detail. Most of my intake of 40K models tends to be like first impression stuff where I look at something and I go like, yeah, that's cool. Or I go, yeah, I'm good. There is some very, very old art of some of like the demon Primarchs, and they're like rough. I'm talking like late 80s, early artwork. Okay, so looking at some of the major volumes of this. So if we think about where the light's coming in, right, we can see like where the light on the shoulder is. We're going to want a bit more light there. Like the hair is catching some light, so I can start to like cross pattern it a little bit and build more texture on top of those to make that volume a little more rounded and make that whole thing feel a bit more in light. Sorry if that was off frame. Something like that. Then I can grab a bit of the same blue. Comes off very bright. Now I want to be a little sparing with the blue furs, and then I'll kind of wash them down once I go over top of this. So these are like stray kind of gray hairs is like what they represent. Okay, so now you can see like this is kind of flat, right? So I can grab some of this brown and make it nice and thin. I can glaze back over the top. That's cool. I'm gonna start an army. So here I'm gonna try and bring back some of this shape a little bit to some of these areas. So again, I'm just gonna use some glazing to soften some of those areas. Just bring some shape back to it, you know? And then some of these, like these dark areas back here, where it's the tapering isn't as good, I can go back in and paint some little lines just to soften that. so that line isn't quite so harsh. All right, fur. And then I'll grab some of this mid-tone once, because that glaze is dry, and just put some of that back over top. Hi, Dan. Okay. You can see once you get used to the technique, it doesn't really take that long. But did this, done all of this so far, and in what, an hour? So yeah, once you get fast with the actual like brush control part of it, the technique does not take that long. Controlled chaos. It doesn't have to be perfect. Like, I don't want to think too much about where I'm really placing the brush strokes. It's more about the overall feeling. If you make it, like I said, if you make it too perfect, it doesn't look natural. Hi, Adam. I'm going to time out, Richard. Okay. So, something like that. Now the face is going to require a bit more precision and detail. Still a little bit on here. I'm not quite happy with. I'm going to grab some more of this like pure dark sand. I'm going to vary up the colors a little. Not quite happy with that one shape. Now that I'm looking at this, really most of this should be in light. So this deep shadow here, if you can see this, hold on, let me zoom in before I go smoke. I gotta fix this. Yeah, I want this light to really push right up next to his skin. So I gotta like get some of those hairs all the way in there. Okay. I mean, you can definitely like keep going. Or you can go too far. That's when you just have to like stop and kind of go back over it with, you can glaze over it, try and bring back some of that shape to the tufts. All right. I will be right back. Okay. Let's continue with the head. So the boar I have the example of has very black fur in his ears. So we're going to play with that idea a little bit by starting from this and instead using some of this blue in with some of the brown and going more gray. So it has quite black around here. So I can play with that a little bit. All right, let's see, what can we do? So I have, oh, it's over on there. I gotta go get it. Be right back. So I can grab some of this guy, Express, which is like contrast paint. So we're well over top of this to just like shift the color. I want this quite dark in here. I'm going to use this like a normal paint, but because it's contrast, it'll show some of that underneath without like changing the color too much or without like getting rid of the brush strokes, right? So you can still see the brush strokes underneath, but I'm shifting that color much darker. And then when I build up on top of this with a more gray tone, it'll have that natural kind of transition that the boar has towards a more gray snout. It's nice for layering effects like this. Like there's many more ways to use it than just the like flood the model kind of technique that you think that the contrast paint would be used for, right? Express color. So now when I take this and mix it with that, with the cold, I can even grab a little bit of the black, which has just a bit of blue in it. It's hard to see on camera, but in person you can see a little more. Now I can start to build up some of that gray on the face. Adam, hello. Thanks for following. Tanith. Hi. Welcome, welcome. Okay, so just start to build some of that gray effect. Who's all these people coming from? Did I miss something? Infernal Brush, thanks for following. I missed something. Adam, Uncle Adam, did you promote this or something? What's going on? You promote my stream on something? Okay. So now I'm not just layering texture, right? But also color variation. By the way, how was VinnyCon? So the more I build these two layers into each other, it softens out this gray to brown transition. So just get that little bit of gray effect on his snout. Girio? I don't know if that's right. Oh. Thanks, Adam. Is it Spoony? Spony? Spony? Della Vita? Hello. Welcome. Hi, all the new viewers. Welcome in. If you don't know who I am, my name's Eric. I paint miniatures for a living, and I'm painting this bus right now. Oh, did you? You met me? World Expo was really nice. I really enjoyed World Model Expo. Thanks, Infernal Brush. Okay. So, I'm continuing to observe how some of this is affected. This is a bit gray also. Here, get some of that texture back. Then the snout, I'm going to layer some of this back on top to continue to merge these together, right? At the transition point between the two different kind of colors of fur. Anybody planning to go to SMC this year? It's not going to be World Model Expo, it'll be SMC again. You might go, yeah. Just maybe. Hey, thinking about it, got a judge or whatever, I don't know. If I could find time in my schedule. Thank you. Okay. Looking at this part, now I need to go a little warmer with it, get a little bit closer to skin, get a little bit of that yellow back in the forehead. Okay. Now, I want to restore a little bit of the volume of the face, just like I did with the part down here. Just use some glazing. cool. This is my first Spirabus. I'm having fun with it. It's a really cool model. Quite enjoyable to paint. All right, they've got, I'm going to grab some of this dark purple. It's very dark kind of section that is like just in the transition from there, like right here in between the eyes. I need to restore some of the shadow there, and then I'll go back over top of it and build back up the light for, because I went just a little overboard. Okay. It can. You have to be even smaller with it. Sorry, for people watching without reading the chat, the question is, do you think this kind of fur rendering would work well in Warhammer scale? I think it can work. I think you have to do it even smaller. And I think it would work best on larger figures and maybe like fur cloaks, not so much like really tiny figures. I think it's a little harder to pull off on like fur gauntlets or something like that. But like for big fur cloaks and things, yeah, I think you can totally use this kind of effect and it'll work fine. I've done it on horses at that scale, and I think it works. You just have to paint maybe like half the size brushstrokes I'm doing. Okay. I'm trying to look at my lighting reference and at my reference of the boar, and I have to make them both kind of work. So some of the areas like around here need to be lighter just because of the lighting direction. It can be a little difficult to paint the volumes while also painting the natural shadows and everything that you sometimes get on unusual fur patterning, something like a wolf pelt. You get all these different like patches of lighter and darker fur. So while you're trying to paint the volumes, you're also trying to paint the patterning itself. And they're fighting against each other. Okay. Now I want my pink. Okay. The nose. I think I could probably maybe do some little dots or something to give a little bit of texture. I don't know if boars have little dots on their noses like dogs do. But yeah, I'm just going to do it because why not? And they have like black eyes, kind of creepy. I didn't say it would be easy. It's definitely possible. I've done it on horses, horse models. Just knowing where. Yeah, I paint tabletop minis. I paint all the box arts for Privateer Press. Well, not all of them. I paint a lot of the box arts for Privateer Press. Okay. Trying to look at the light, see where I need more. I definitely need more on his face. I'm going to switch to a little bit smaller brush here. Also need to work in some of the zones of light on the shadow sign. Need more water. I have been known to paint some Kingdom Death minis. Yeah, you're not going to find any of my my stuff on Cool Mini or not. That's before my time. Wasn't really in the scene when that website was popular. Hello, who dat? Satsume Hats. Hello. Welcome. Okay. Yeah. Pretty happy with the overall placement of color and light on the face. Volumes, but now I need to exaggerate the light some more. Where's the most light is, mark it with a dot. So the most light is here, here, right there, right here, right here, here, and there. There's also quite a bit in this little area. Inside that tear duct. Same with the other side, actually. Okay. Stretch the back. Last little place. All right. So upper eyelid. And then this part of the cheek actually gets quite a bit of light. Well, kind of coming together now, getting more light on the boar's face. Let's quickly get some of the light on top of the ear. All right, so this part is less like painting fur and more, I'm still going to paint the lines in the direction that the fur would grow, but now I'm more like just highlighting the facial volumes than I am so much painting the fur texture, right? Because I need to give some expressiveness to the face. Okay. I think that looks pretty good. I think I could put a little more light in between his eyes. Who's that? Hobbies for Happiness. Hello, thanks. See you, Richard. Yeah, let's put just a little more light in between the eyes. I think you can actually see a little bit of that skin tone showing through the fur on here. So I'm going to glaze a little bit of this pink right here. Just to make it look like the skin is showing through the fur. And if I need, I can paint a little bit of that texture back on top. Let's give a little of that to the eyes too, just like okay. Something like that. And I can grab a little bit of the purple. Thanks, Mozo. Also welcome. Then if I need, which I do, I'm saying, I can get a little bit of that shadow back in there with some of the the purple and brown. Nuln oil. Nuln oil is perfectly useful. If it's got its uses. I'm not gonna make fun of using washes. I mean, this is literally black contrast paint right here. Black express colors. Don't be mad at me, Vallejo. Express color black. Look, it's going to take me some time to get used to saying that. Okay, I think it's time for another cigarette. So, most of this side's done. Still got some work to do on the ear and the back ridge, but gives you an idea of how it's done. I'm going to paint these eyes in even darker. Might give them a shine, or I'll just leave them black like they're holes. I mean, I don't know how long the eyeballs would last in a boar hood, you know. Pretty sure they would rot away pretty fast. Can't try that, Adam. Thanks. Thanks, Tui. Thanks, Moza. I will continue to work on it once I get back. Hi, Blocks Boy. Yeah, and then we'll work on the shadow side also, so you can see how I would handle the shadow, the shadow side by probably just desaturating it a lot. But, all right, I'll be right back. I'm going to put a little dot. I'm just going to put a little dot in each eye. Hi, Thron. Thronol. Low. Okay, so now I've got my dark violet kind of color. I'll just mix that with some blue. Actually, I'm going to mix it with a little bit of the yellow. That's going to first desaturate the purple a little. Thanks for following. And then we're going to do basically same method we did on the other side. This time leaning more into the violets, and don't need to go nearly as bright on this, because we want this to maintain that shadow tone. Hi, Pognock. Okay, something like that. Now I'm going to mix it up by going a little more gray. I have a little bit of that purpley undertone on the shadow side, but then I can build a bit more gray tone on top of it. And the shadow side is going to have much less contrast to the fur. There should be less detail in the shadow side, because the reason you have definition and detail is because of light creating shadows. And in the shadow side, you don't have that light to make the definition. So a bit more flat on the amount of texture is a good thing. What makes a great paint job? What makes it stand out? That's a hard question. There's a few things. I mean, one could be something new, something a little innovative. One could just be, there's a lot of factors that make a good paint job, right? You could have good use of color, good use of light, things that are well defined. The reason I think someone like Mark Mosklin's paint jobs are so good is his like excellent rendering of volumes. So there's a lot of factors that make a good paint job. Some kind of unique style. Where did so the inspiration for the purple skin came from one of the orcs in the Rings of Power TV show. I just liked the way it looked, so I thought, hey, I think I'll try that. Yes, I went to Monte San Savino this year. Thranulial? I don't know how you say your name. I won Best of Show this year. Yeah, I did okay. It's fine. I don't expect everyone to like keep up on everything all the time. Highest placing American? That's the highest placing anyone. Not that awards mean everything, you know. In fact, that is a deeper conversation I'd like to have at some point. I don't know if now's like the right time, but there was a certain sense of like, I don't know. I'll say I was happy, but I felt a little lost afterwards, I guess. Kind of sense of like, what do I do next kind of thing after Monty. And that's, I think, comes from so it's like single identity goals, right? Like you work really, really hard for something for a long time, and then you achieve the thing you set out to do, and then you don't know what to do after. My point being is like these people put a lot of weight and value on competition and whatever else. And I think it's important to remember like why you got into doing something in the first place, like what, why you got into mini painting or whatever in the first place, and enjoying the the process of learning and improving and everything. So deep philosophical conversation short, like don't it's good to push yourself, and it's good to feel pride in what you've accomplished, and getting medals can be, or awards at competitions can be a great way to measure your progress, but they are not everything. Hi, Torbjorn. Thanks for the gifted sub. Yeah, the journey is what's really important, right? The process of creating something So this is why one of the reasons this year I wanted to do more streaming and everything is like I needed to. I'm a very goal-oriented person, so I think that was one of the big reasons I wanted to do more streaming this year, is I can have more of an opportunity to talk about miniature painting, teach, pass on what I have learned from my experiences and share it with other people. Well, it's a two-sided thing. Like I've never painted necessarily for competition. I've never painted a mini and went like, oh, well, I've never painted for judges. I've painted for competition, right? But I don't change the way I paint for competition. But I did put a lot of like value in the, not necessarily, I guess Monty was like the big one. Like that was like the big goal. I don't put a lot of like value on things like Golden Demon or whatever. They'd never meant a ton to me. And I know some people like would love to win a Slayer sword, and that's like a big goal of theirs. But winning the sword isn't everything, is my point. But yes, I've always painted for me in terms of like what I like and what makes me happy. The bigger point I'm trying to make is that like don't just think about like the end, what's the end goal? Because once you reach that goal, like where do you go from there? Like everything I've done for the past 3 years or whatever, since I first went to Monty, or even before that, like every other competition, whether it be Novo or Golden Demon or whatever, were just like stepping stones to get to where I wanted to be. But what is important is that you enjoy the process along the way. How do I handle my inner critic? That stuff. No, I definitely like look at other people's work and I say like, oh, what makes their stuff so good? One, I think being critical of yourself, it certainly can help you stay humble. But I think some people can definitely be like overly critical of themselves. Like, it's important to just like do your best. And you know, learn from what you do and move on, I think is the big thing for me. Like, don't stress about like trying to make everything perfect. Learn something from each piece and grow and get better at whatever you're trying to get better at, and then move on from there. There is no perfection, I think, is what's really important to know. Even my piece for Monty, there's things that I think could be better about it. You know, I asked for feedback from the judges afterwards, like what they thought could be better. So I think there's always room for improvement and to just, you know, keep working. So judges, yes. Okay, that is true. I mean, I've been a judge in many competitions, but judges do not, a good judge should not judge from their bias. Now, they can have a certain perspective, but things like they should be able to put aside certain biases. Like, I like non-metallic metal. Am I going to judge a figure poorly because it's painted with true metallic metal? No. It's not my personal taste, but I understand, like, I can enjoy a figure that is painted with true metallics. So a good judge is able to put aside their biases and enjoy a figure for its own merits. And getting feedback from people is important. You might not always agree with every piece of feedback you get, but if 10 people all give you the same piece of feedback, there's probably something there. And a lot of times you sometimes have to be able to filter through feedback that's like maybe exactly the change they're offering you is not the thing you need to do, but maybe like it can lead you to a piece of advice that you could take. Like if they point out something like, oh, you know what, I would do this to the leather. Like maybe, well, you had a different idea for the way the leather should be done, but maybe there is something wrong with, maybe there's something there that needs to be addressed. Yeah, 2A, I agree. Don't strip your models. I know personally I own plenty of models that I could paint a model every single day for the next probably like 3 years and never have to strip a model. Just finish a model and move on, Stop seeking perfection and seek improvement is my biggest advice I could give. I've never stripped a model. All right, I think I'm pretty happy with that shadow side fur. I've roughly achieved the kind of volume and texture I want. I think it's enough that it reads as the shadow region. Who's that? What was that? Gary, thanks for gifting a sub. Paying it forward. Thanks, Gary. Yeah. I don't really know. I hope that makes sense, and I hope it doesn't seem like conceited or whatever. I don't know. Because like clearly, yes, I was extremely happy with the results of Monty. It was something I was aiming for quite a while. Something I never even knew that if it would be possible or not. I've talked about this a bit with 2A in private. But yeah, like putting all your value in something, like I think it's really important to enjoy the process. All right, this needs to be in shadow. Yeah, I've abandoned models before. That's definitely happened. Yeah, I haven't messed with the ears too much yet. Honestly, this one has this one will have a bit of cast shadow on it too. So I need to get to that. There's also a little spot on his head here that I need to adjust. I've never, I mean, I've worked on like, I tend to work on one project at a time, almost always. The question was from Gary was, do I go back years later and finish a model if I've abandoned it? Typically, no. Once I like put down a model, that it's done. Like that's it. I do not tend to like pick back up a model. I've decided I'm finished with that project. So I wouldn't feel bad if you like move on and you never touch that figure again. Like, oh well. Time to move on to something else, you know? There's nothing, no one gonna yell at you. And you can be like, you could think like, oh, it's a waste of money or whatever, but like, how many hours, you know, you go to a movie, you spend $10 going to see a movie in the movie theater. If you get 20 hours worth of painting a $30 figure and you never finish, like, sounds like you got your money's worth out of that figure to me. The picture is very black, but I don't necessarily like that, so I am going to give him a little bit of skin tone inside the inner ear. Just because I feel like it. Is there a model I would consider painting again? Like one I'd want to paint twice? I don't like painting figures twice either. The only figures I've painted more than once are like sketching on academic busts because it's something I do just for like experimentation and fun. Or like a figure that I paint in a workshop and then I don't finish. Like I've never finished the figure that I painted during a workshop. It's more just like me demoing techniques and things. So no, I don't think I would ever go back and intentionally paint a figure a second time. I wouldn't want to paint this figure again. I mean, it's a cool figure, but nothing about it makes me want to like paint it twice. Yeah, I'm not doing that. I use Vallejo and Chimera. And something like the Spira bust is pretty small. Like if I wanted to do just like an afternoon sketch on that figure, I could see doing that. But that would be like me doing an exercise where I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna paint it for a few hours and whatever I get to, I get to. There's even figures that like I've been asked to paint where I would maybe have like an idea of how I would like to paint that figure. And I just don't want to paint it because someone else has done what I think is like the quintessential version of that figure. Where I look at it and go like, yep, that's exactly how I would want to approach it. And I don't want to tackle that model just because I think it was done as well as it's, not maybe as well as it's going to be done, but it's like, yeah, my version is going to be so similar to that I don't even have interest in doing it. No, I see now Mark's Lumberjack to me, I think is open to so many different interpretations that I think that could be a fun model to paint. There, because of like how kind of plain the actual figure is, I think it's very available to do lots of interesting things. Like you could practice all different kinds of free hands on the shirt or the sweater or the jacket. So someone the guy, for example, the guy who landed that like giraffe recently. It's like the Giraffe King sitting in the throne. The guy who made that figure, I don't remember his name, approached me about also painting that figure. And I was like, yeah, I'm just not interested because I think Land did exactly what I would do on it, right? I don't really see another way to interpret that figure than what he did. It's not that it's not a cool figure and might be fun to paint, but I don't feel I can do anything on it that would make it particularly enjoyable for me. I don't really have a way to put my spin on it or whatever. People use magnifying glasses. I have just reading glasses when I go to do like really tiny, like eyeballs or something. Luckily, my eyes are still quite good, so I can still see what I'm working on. But yeah, I know like Dave Caldwell specifically paints with like the like kind of jeweler's magnifier glasses, and quite a lot of people paint with magnifiers like that. Yeah, anytime I'm painting something like really tiny, if I'm trying to do like really, really small details, I will use them. For something like this, like painting this fur, I don't need to be perfectly accurate. If I'm not exactly accurate, it's just texture that I've made, right? It's more random. Okay. So where's that at? Mephistos. Mephistos, thanks. Thanks for following. Welcome. All right. What else on the fur do we need to do? I don't have any book recommendations. Most of the way I tend to learn is I tend to learn better by like observation than necessarily like study. So a lot of what I do is I look at like not just other mini painters, but like illustrators and things, and I try and see like the decision making they do and understand like why they do things certain ways. It's what I would call like in like engagement observation, where you're like, it's not just study, like you're not just trying to like copy, but you're specifically like trying to ask yourself like why they did things a certain way or whatever, you know. But I think there's a lot of things to learn from illustration and other avenues outside of miniature painting. So like I do occasionally watch like videos by like croco or something like that that are interesting. I'm sure like you're interested in learning oil painting, like watching a class, like a virtual class by Patrick Jones would be fantastic, right? And totally apply to miniature painting. Thank you, Ben Layton. Appreciate it. I've looked at a lot of like Frank Frazetta and various like Magic the Gathering artists, Wei Wang. I've studied his painting. Like I've specifically tried to mimic his painting in miniature form. Wei Wang, if you don't know who that is like one of the main illustrators for Blizzard for a long time. So I also have classical training in art and graphic design. So there are things that I have learned throughout the years that, have led me in my education also. Yes, I agree, Dr. Tentacles. Wei Wang's Diablo art, all of his art is like, even his concept artwork that he did a lot of the concept artwork for the Warcraft movie is like super good. Oh, it's definitely. Absolutely. Concepts like painting is painting, right? You're just painting on a 3-dimensional surface instead of a 2-dimensional surface. Light and shadow still work the same way. You're just trying to, when you're painting on 2-dimensional, whether it's canvas or digital, you have to not just be a painter, but also a draftsman. So, like you have to create the volumes and things. When you're painting on a figure, the volumes and stuff have already been created for you. Now you have the choice of whether you want to enhance or reduce certain volumes, change volumes, things like that. But a lot of the draftsman work has already been done. So you're taking one part out of it and you're just focused purely on light placement and color. Light placement, color, texture, things like that. Yeah, things like contrast, all that stuff applies the same. Jar Asnable, like Char Asnable. Welcome. Char. Jar. Anyways, yeah. Concepts, they apply across Miar. Miarasnable. Or Mayar. What are they talking about? I don't know. I'm painting fur. Getting pretty close, honestly, to finishing the cape, whatever, hood. Let me zoom out. I haven't looked at it at a distance in a minute. Yeah, cool. How am I finding painting it? I think it's really great. I'm really enjoying painting it. I can understand now why people like painting Lucas's figures so much. Yeah, most of my inspiration also too, it comes from illustration. Yeah, Magic the Gathering. I mean, honestly, Magic the Gathering is like the top employer of fantasy artists at the moment. Them and Riot Games are keeping fantasy artists employed. I mean, some of the top working fantasy artists at the moment, like, work for Magic the Gathering. Brahm, Karl Kopinski, like, these guys produce a ton of work. A lot of it's for Wizards of the Coast. You know, 20 is way too many figures to enter into a contest. I'd pare it down to like maybe your 10 favorite. Well, I mean, any kind of art field or production art can cause burnout in artists. Like, there's a lot of work that's got to get done. And some people can't always handle like the like fast turnaround. I mean, they do some pretty like, I've never worked for Riot. I don't know specifically, but I've worked in the like advertising industry and things. So I understand like, hell man, like if Magic the Gathering, a set comes out, if it's similar to that, like a set comes out every 3 months or whatever, like you don't have all the time in the world to just sit around and work on a piece forever, you know? I know what box art painting is like. A lot of times I have, a week or two to paint a figure. Yeah, Andrew entered 24. That's way too many. Lan entered like 30. It's ridiculous. Couldn't even see them all. It's like, oh, that's cool. That's a giant display by Lan. I got to look at each one for about 5 seconds. I have no idea what color boar's hoofs are, but I'm just going to go with black. I think they're black. But okay, so let me question. What do I think? What would you say the difference between a painter that enters the master category and the open one? So I think what you mean is the masters in the standard category, because open is like a subcategory where so you have painting, ambient, and open. Yeah, okay. So you mean standard. The difference is up to you. So most of the time, the masters category is entered by, I would say half of the masters category is like professionals. But I think that it's really up to the painter to decide whether they want to enter masters or not. The first year I went, I chose to enter masters. I wasn't a professional or anything. I just wanted to compete with those guys. So I think it's really up to you, right? There's nothing saying that like, oh, you've got to enter standard or whatever. It's just where you feel comfortable. And personally, like, I wanted to put my work up against the best, so I chose to enter masters. Yeah, there was like a argument going around for a while that like there should be a pro category in contests. And I was just like, it didn't make any sense to me because if you elevated pro to like its own division, and so there was like masters and pro, like I would just want to enter pro. Like, well, I am pro, so I would have to enter pro, right? But if I wasn't a professional, like say I was someone like Albert, right? Albert Moreno, like who isn't a professional. He's definitely a hobbyist, but I know for a fact he would want to enter and compete against the best. So yeah, it's really just where you see yourself. I think if you have to ask yourself whether you should be in Masters, you probably shouldn't be in Masters. Okay. Um. What else? Yeah, I guess I could do a little work on the inside of the cloak, whatever. I'm kind of running out of things to do on this. I could paint the teeth. Running out of things to do as in I've finished mostly what I wanted to achieve tonight. That's all in shadow. Yeah, you just have to do 10 years of work in 5 years. I think it's really about like focus. Like, yeah, Torbjorn went from like winning gold at Monty from just starting, like, to being one of the top sculptors working right now. So, and from what I hear, worked a lot. There's a level of obsession, you know. Yes, I will be releasing this to YouTube right after, like, I will upload it as soon as I can. Yeah, there's a lot of people that, you know, have gotten really good really fast. It's very true. Information is more widely available, and but yeah. Okay. I think I'm done for the night. I think I'm gonna call that finished for now. Yeah. Cool.